Okay, so welcome, and we are going to start going through Chapter 13, which is the spinal cord. So first we want to start with some of the gross anatomy of the spinal cord, and here are your learning goals for this section. So I'd like to take you to a PowerPoint with some of the images here that may be helpful for you. So first off, I'd like to point out, okay, this is the spinal cord that we're looking at here, okay, and it sits inside of that vertebral cavity, okay. So what we see over here is we actually see a vertebra. And this part right here, if you lean over and touch your back on your spine, you're going to feel those bumps going up and down, and so this is that part of this bone. And so that's going to be the posterior part of the bone. This fat part of the bone in white, right up in this area, that's actually going to be right very close to the back side of your body cavity, of the ventral body cavity. Okay, and so your vertebrae actually have this hole in the middle of it, and the spinal cord goes up and down your back in the middle of this hole in the bone. So the spinal cord is encased by bone, and that gives it a very good protection. Okay, so if we look at the regions of the spinal cord, you're going to notice that there's a cervical region in blue, a thoracic region in orange, a lumbar region in green, and then a sacral portion. Okay, and then at the very tip here in yellow is the coccygeal portion. Now you should notice that coming off of the spinal cord are these stringy things, and these are the spinal nerves. So if they come off the spinal cord, they're called spinal nerves. If you remember, we talked about cranial nerves in the last lesson, and those were nerves that came directly off of the brain. Okay, so these come in pairs. There's one on the right side, there's one on the left side, and in the cervical region there's 8 of them. Thoracic region, there's going to be 12 of them. Lumbar region, there's 5, and then the sacral region, there are also 5. Now, something to keep in mind is that the spinal cord actually ends right at this region called the conus medullaris. Okay, it's called the conus medullaris because the spinal cord is actually going to taper, okay, to a point. So here's the spinal cord, and it tapers to this point, and that part that tapers is called the conus medullaris. It forms a cone. Okay. Now, you may notice though that here there are still nerves that continue down this vertebral cavity, and it looks like a horse's tail. And so cauda means tail, and echina means horse. So this literally means the horse's tail. It's just a bunch of spinal nerves. The spinal cord ends here, but the nerves continue down this cavity. Okay. A couple of things actually help to anchor these this cord in the cavity, because you don't want this end just loose and flapping around. That would damage the tissue. So from the end down to the very bottom of the cavity is this thing called the filum terminale, and let me see if I can show that a little better. So filum terminale right here. So it's just a thin piece of connective tissue, goes from the bottom of the cavity to the tip of that conus medullaris, and it anchors that spinal cord so it can't flap around. Okay. The other thing that we're going to see that also helps anchor this cord, now this we're looking at a transverse section, so it would be going through the vertebra like this, and then I'm looking down on it. Okay, and so these little white things right here are actually connective tissue, okay, and they're going to anchor the column to the side of the vertebral cavity. So if we look here, it would be going on the sides each way, okay? or you could think of it anchoring on either side this way. So you've got anchors on the side, and then you've got an anchor on the bottom. Okay, so the anchors on the side are the denticulate ligaments, and let me type out that name for you, denticulate ligaments. So they anchor the spinal cord on the sides, and then it's that filum terminale that anchors it at the bottom. Okay. Now again, I want to point out from this view, remember this is the transverse section, and then you're looking down on the spinal cord. Okay, so as a reminder, this part here is that bumpy part that you can feel along your back. Okay, and this is that fat part of the bone that's right up against that ventral body cavity. Okay, and so this is the spinal cord right in here, encased on bone on either side. And similar to the brain, you're going to notice that there's areas of white matter, okay, and that's where you have myelinated axons. And then in here, okay, you're going to notice that there's areas of gray matter. And this is going to be unmyelinated cells, and particularly you'll find collections of cell bodies. One other thing that I would like to point out from this view is you also have two regions, one in the cervical region and one in the lumbar area, the area where the lumbar spinal nerves are coming out of the cord, where it's enlarged. What that means is that this is normally the width of the spinal cord, and an enlargement, it's going to get fatter. Okay, and the reason why is that here at the cervical enlargement region right up here, a lot of these nerves are going out to supply the upper limb. Okay, so they're going to be supplying that upper arm. Okay, so because of that, there's a lot of more nervous tissue because it's got to get out to those upper limbs. Okay, and then the same is true in the lumbar enlargement area. We have a lot of nervous tissue that's going out to supply the lower limbs. And so that's why, because we have so much more nervous tissue going to supply these limbs, then you get this fatter region. Okay, so that is the cervical enlargement and the lumbar enlargement.